At IFA, they do talk about phones and other hardware and things like that. But as Jason alluded to earlier, we got a little bit of rumors going around about the upcoming Nexus announcement from Google. And I wanted to go back and look at previous shows over the years, because I feel like we've reported this exact same rumor every year before they announce new Nexus phones. But here we are again. Here's the 2016 version. Our buddies over at Android Central are saying that they've got multiple sources saying that the next batch of Nexuses won't be called Nexus at all. The expected HTC devices are going to hit the market with a different brand name altogether. Google plans to put the Google brand ahead of all else. So once again, we're saying the end of Nexus is coming. Within those phones, we're going to see a vanilla Android phone with additional software improvements on top of it. Could be the reason for eschewing the Nexus name. Who knows? There's going to be a new nav button layout, which we've already seen leaks of. Color scheme, a settings app, and these are all stuff that we've kind of seen little bits and pieces over the past couple of months. And they're likely going to release 2 Google-branded Wear watches as well too, because they want to keep it all in the family. So what do we think? Do we think that this is actually finally the end is nigh for Nexus, or is this just a hot rumor? Wow. Chris, what do you think?
I mean, it's definitely been. I mean, for years now we've been hearing it was like Android Silver and all that fun stuff. I know the early leaks of like the Sailfish phone and all that. They didn't have the Nexus branding on the back, and I think that's kind of what got people's little gears turning and thinking, maybe they're going to drop the whole Nexus branding. But yeah, I don't know. It'd be interesting if they did.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you're talking about rumors, you don't know anything for sure until it actually happens. It was 2014. It was 2014 when there were the rumors that were kind of going around that the next Nexus batch wouldn't actually be Nexus, that it would they would remove the Nexus program and replace it with Android Silver, like you just mentioned, Chris. And then, Google, of course, came out and dismissed the rumors, and that didn't actually happen. I think shortly after that, we found out about Android One, and so then it was, which is kind of their initiative for bringing low-cost devices to kind of developing countries.
And that logo for Android One was kind of silverish, so maybe that's where it came from. Who knows? But,
there was confusion about whether the rumors were just misinterpreted and that it wasn't actually a replacement for Nexus, but a different effort entirely, and that became Nexus or Android One or whatever, which hasn't been doing so hot. But anyways,
So I really want to kind of like poo-poo this, because I say we've heard this rumor before. Yeah. They put so much into the Nexus brand. At Google I/O, they talk about how Nexus is the core developer. Like this is the perfect installation of Android that we want developers to work against. But then I'm trying to think devil's advocate wise and be like, well, why? Like, what does Nexus mean? Nexus doesn't mean anything. It's just a word. Why not put Google forefront? Like you have the Apple iPhone. Why don't you make the Google Android phone and just, put all your marketing dollars behind this brand that is multinational and everyone knows around the world, as opposed to having to explain what Nexus means?
Yeah, well, that's a really great point, right? Like Nexus as a word that defines a branch of hardware developed, at least in part by Google, doesn't really tell anything to the average consumer, but it certainly appeals to a lot of the hardcore people, the developers and that sort of stuff.
But it's just, what's in a name? Why not just make the Google Phone Developer Edition? Or Google Pro phone, or at some point, the developers, they don't care. I would imagine developers don't care what it's called as long as they're getting the stock thing that they can work against.
But this wouldn't be stock. That's a really big change here. Sundar Pichai actually kind of teased that this was Google's thinking. I think it was last May, just basically saying, our plan with our hardware is to really kind of bring new features to it. There are, like you said, when you were introducing the story, there are a bunch of these features, things like the Nexus launcher and everything that we haven't seen yet, that we're assuming are going to be folded into this based on this news. I guess their plan here, at least based on the article from Android Central, is that instead of, naming it the Nexus phone, it would be branded around Google, which is very, very familiar to many, many people all across the world. Then Google just has to go through the steps of making it available in the, wider ways than they have. And we know that, at least we've heard, that there's going to be carrier involvement, that there would be a Verizon version of the device for good or bad here in the U.S., and that's just one example. I don't know. I mean, Chris, what do you think? Do you think that we're kind of at a point, or Google's kind of at a point where maybe it wants to go, like in a perfect world, it wants to go toe to toe with something like the iPhone? Maybe they're at a point to where they don't feel like they need to worry about stepping on partners' toes, and they're more comfortable moving into competitor territory. Do you think that's what might be happening?
I mean, I've always kind of felt like that's sort of where they were going with the Nexus. It's just some of the features, the fingerprint sensor, and adding that, and I don't know. I feel like, honestly, with the Nexus, and what was it? They got rid of like the micro SD cards when that was kind of like a big sort of taboo. But I mean, I've always just sort of felt like Google was sort of eyeing this whole, like the reason of the Nexus, or like the whole meaning behind it, was kind of offering this like direct alternative to the iPhone, but stock Android in the purest sense. But like you said, they're kind of moving away from that and kind of maybe trying to focus a little more on their own Google services and things like that. But whether or not maybe they'll have like a special, like pure Nexus Android developer phone, maybe
they should name it that, so that they make sure to get all the words in there, so that there's no confusion whatsoever on what a consumer's getting.
I mean, it's weird because the problem, for me at least, with the Nexus 6P and the 5X, and before then the Nexus 5, and on and on and on, I think the problem hasn't been a branding issue; it's been a distribution issue.
Yeah,
it's been mainly that the phone was only available by purchasing directly from Google and all that sort of stuff, and there was very minimal carrier involvement because that took away from it being the stock experience and all that sort of stuff. If they're going to move forward with a Google phone, I want that announcement to be like, this is the Google phone, and it's available through Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T today. You can go into Best Buy and buy it. You can buy it on our website, and they just go total, kind of full bore with making it available to people, and then really making a push for that Google branded phone, whether or not it's stock or not, whether or not there's a developer edition or a pro edition that you can only get on the Google site, who knows? But then again, I wouldn't be surprised if we see the next round of Nexus phones, and this is just a rumor.
Yeah, and I feel like we kind of already saw that too with the Nexus 6. So maybe they saw that as like a failed experiment, possibly. I mean, they had the carrier versions, and that was sort of just a total mess. Yeah.
So I had the carrier version of the Galaxy Nexus, and it was not a pretty, like, however long I had that phone, that was not a lot of fun having the Verizon version of that phone.
That wasn't good, but can that be solved? I mean, I know the chat room someone said good luck about having the carrier sell a phone without carrier crapware. Maybe there's a Google phone that's got all the Verizon crapware. Like, is there a way for Google to meet the carriers in the middle and say, hey, this is our best foot forward with the phone, add your crap, but not too much, and make it available? I wonder if there's any wiggle room there, or if Google's going to dig their heels in and say, no, the perfect Android phone you can only get from us, and then you have the stalemate and never moves forward. It never gets the penetration that we assume they want. So.
Yeah, I know. I feel like if Google is kind of turning a corner right now and saying, let's take our hardware and be more serious about it. Let's be more serious about providing hardware options that are totally under our thumb, design-wise, experience-wise, and market directly to the consumer, and take this to the next level coming from us, and not being afraid of the competitor aspect of things. I think that's good for Google. But I wish that beyond that, they could do what Apple has done with the carriers, which is just dig their feet in and say, no, we won't do that. We want to offer this and still offer it through you. And I'm not sure that Google can pull that off.
Well, but and that kind of goes back to what you said, is that Apple pulled it off. Would the iPhone have had the success it had if it wasn't available at AT&T through AT&T at that launch? If the iPhone rolled out and it was only available at Apple stores, would it have penetrated the market as much as it has? I don't think it would have. I think you need to have those carriers, and either Google throws their weight around, and maybe that weight is in the form of money and marketing dollars, and there are different ways to tackle this problem from a business standpoint. Sure. And if they're really going to go for it, I think they have to involve the carriers.
Yeah.